autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Okay, so I wanted to take a couple of seconds to talk about ABA therapy, why it's so super duper important, and what we as parents need to do to get the most out of it. And I apologize, but I am going to get a little bit on a soapbox because a couple of years ago, something happened to me where a parent came to me, and it was right after I'd started my radio show, and she came to me in my community and said, so my kiddo just got diagnosed with autism. I know you know a little bit about this. I said, I'm not an expert. And she goes, no, but I know you've been there, done there. Jem seems to be doing well. Okay, what do I do? And I said, well, you know, I would really recommend you know, that you clean up your child's diet. I would really recommend that you get them as healthy as possible. I would really recommend that you do ABA therapy and that you do it intensively because that's what all the science says. And I would really recommend that you learn all the principles of ABA because that's, you know, what's found to be effective and whatever. And she was like, oh, okay. And she left, and then I saw her a couple weeks later, and I said, how are things going? And she was like, oh, you know, it just, I know you said to do this, and I know, you know, and we're thinking about the ABA thing, but, you know, I can't quit my job, you know, I know you quit your job and you started doing something else, but not everybody can do that. And, you know, and we just, like, we need to keep a roof over our head. So, you know, we might try 10 hours. I don't know, we may not do it at all. And I was like, well, you know, everybody has to do what they have to do. And it was a couple of years later that I ran into her again, and she all but punched me and said, how dare you? And how could you have done that to me? You knew that I needed to get my child that therapy, and you knew how much it would have helped him, and you did not say to me, and your whole life will be different if you don't do this. And she said, you didn't make it sound like it was urgent. You know, she said, you recommended it, but you didn't say to me, like, and if you don't do this, you're going to be mad at yourself forever. And for me, I was so upset and took that so to heart. And I said, okay, gloves off. From now on, I'm not going to mamby-pamby because I can't afford to. I can't afford to because I didn't put it in the right perspective for her. I didn't think about where she was coming from, which was overwhelmed, tired, exhausted, and not knowing what she was facing. So, you know, gloves off, and you'll hopefully accept my apology for the fact that I'm not going to mamby-pamby it for you. So here's the deal. There's so much more science that needs to be done on autism. There's so much more science that needs to be done. But a lot of science is in, and a lot of it is conclusive in terms of what we should be doing today. And if you got the news about what the science was a year ago, I have news for you. It's new. There's new science that's in. There's new science that's in as of last week. And part of my responsibility is to share it with you and then say to you, and you gotta do it. And guess what? It's gonna be hard. And there is going to be no part of it that's going to be easy, and I don't want to sugarcoat it for you at all. But here's what we know. At State of the Union right now, we know that if we get children, and you're going to say, but what about this and what about, there's a lot of things we don't know, right? But here's what we do know. If we get children between the ages of 3 and 5 or 6, and we give those children a couple of different things, between 25 and 40 hours of ABA, but I will tell you that the 25 to 30, know that lots of kids were looked at in this setup, and they had different amounts of skill ability, right? So there were some kids who were very high functioning that 25 They squeak by and they are doing really well, but that 25 is not the prescription, right? If you want the best possible circumstances for your child to get the furthest, then what the studies clearly show is that 40 hours is the benchmark. 40 hours is the starting benchmark of where you have to go. And on top of that, the kids who do the best, because not all kids who get 40 hours get to a point where they are completely indistinguishable from their neurotypical peers. So what are the determining factors of the kids who do well? Getting 40 hours, a minimum of 40 hours, key, right? But secondary to that is that they got to have experienced people designing the program, which means not only do you need to have probably a BCBA, although, there are some people who are amazing who don't yet have their BCBAs that are getting their BCBAs, but BCBA, you got to have an experienced BCBA. And on top of that, they have to have access to a curriculum that's amazing. Now, I got to say to you, your BCBA can be writing curriculum, and that might be great, but that's going to take a whole bunch of time. And how effective is it if they're just writing it and trying it out? Your BCBA they can get access to skills. This, we already know, is a curriculum that works, right? With an experienced BCBA. And your BCBA can have access to that. Let me just tell you, go to skillsforautism.com, or you can call 877-975-4559. Okay, so, and people have gotten grants to be able to have this for their schools, for their communities. Like, there is a cost that comes with skills. It's not as much as 90% of the things in autism, but still, there's a cost. But don't let that stop you. There are grants and things, but that's the curriculum, right? You got to have a good curriculum because it has to make sense to get to progress. So you got to have the hours, you got to have somebody who's designing the program, and they have to have access to a great curriculum. But you know what the next most important thing is for your child to have success? That is that the parents have to learn these techniques and have to be utilizing them past the 40 hours. Have to. So not only should I have said to that parent, when she said, what do I need to do? Not only should I have said, you got to get good quality ABA and you got to get it yesterday. I should have said, and you need to become as close to an expert as you can on how to do the intervention with your child. That's the recipe. And people shortchange it all the time. And let me say to you, you have other things going on in your life. I know you do. But this is where we get into, where's your perspective on this? See, I'm going to cry. I have to tell you that when my son started his intensive ABA therapy, we had other things going on. And one of them was my best friend was diagnosed with cancer. And it was horrifying to me. Because I had a sister who was ill and a mother who was ill in other states. And I was like, I felt like taffy, that I was being pulled in 7 different directions about what do I need to do and when do I need to do it. And I had to prioritize. Now, that did not mean that I wasn't there for my friend, but it meant that I never went for chemo with her. And to this day, that pains me to say to you. Her husband said to me, we want for some of her friends to go for chemo, and she would really like for you to go and be there with her for chemo, to be there and hold her hand through it. And I want to tell you how important that was to me and how much I would have loved to have done that. But that when she went for chemo was when my son had clinic. And I had to prioritize. And I had to say, I have to be at my son's clinic. I want to be able to be in both places, but I cannot. And I brought this life into this world, and I know what the prescription is. And I had a set of parents who said to me, this is what you have to do. And you have to prioritize whatever that clinic is. I mean, CARD called it clinic now. They don't call it that now. Now they call it parent training. And other ABA providers call it different things, but it's a period of time when you sit down and talk about what is working for your child, and you work with the BCBA to figure out what the next steps are. And it's very easy for us to say, well, they can do that in a room and just message us. But if you are not on the team, you are not getting the prescription the way it needs to be written. And now, 10 years later, as I've had opportunity to meet all these families and meet kids that are doing so awesome, that their autism is not a disability for them anymore. I mean, we can use all different kinds of words. We can use the word recovery. We can use the word remission, but we can say that they're neurotypically, you can't tell the difference between them and their neurotypical peers. That's the phrase that I'm looking for. We can say all of those things, right? But the way I look at it as a mom and as a former teacher is there anything that has to do with a diagnosis of autism that's preventing them from doing the things that they want to do in life? And I see across the board, the kids that are in that category, call it whatever you want, in that category, it's because they made a commitment as a family. And sometimes that means it's a single mom with 3 kids, right? But she made a commitment that she was going to do this and get the prescription. 40 hours of ABA, but more ABA happening, delivered by the parent afterwards, even in exhaustion and tears. Getting, talented people on the team that are experienced, so that and making sure that they have a curriculum that makes sense. I heard somebody at the retreat talking about a young man, 14 years old, that has been working on the same 2 lessons for a couple of years now. And when I tell you, it makes me mad and it makes me want to throw up. You've got to make sure that you've got talented people and that they have access to a curriculum, and they don't have to write it themselves. They can use skills. skillsforautism.com. 877-975-4559. And listen when I say this to you, that if you have a group of people that need this curriculum and cannot afford it, please write to me and I will help you to try to figure out who can help you to do that. I know that Autism Care and Treatment Today has given grants before to families and to groups to be able to provide skills. And I know that there have been grants by states that have given it to schools and to ABA providers. So all things are possible. And if you need help with that, I would be proud to be on your team to help you figure out how you can get access to it, okay? Because it's there. A lot of work was done. That curriculum is there and it works. It's the same curriculum that my child had. I can tell you that this curriculum works. And there isn't another one like it. It comes with an assessment. It comes with a whole bunch of things. It's fantabulous. I can't say enough nice thing about skills. But it's just one of the parts of the prescription. And I so deeply need for all the parents to listen for a moment while I say to you that I understand how it feels when you're in the intensive intervention part of it and you want to run. I said something in a meeting the other day, and it was so honest that afterwards I was like, oh, I should never have said that. I should never have said that, because it was like to the bone honest. But I made a commitment then that I was going to keep saying it so that people would know that when I say I understand, that after my child was diagnosed and the first time that I fully understood what the prescription was and what it was going to take from me and what it was going to take from my husband, I remember saying to a very close friend in total confidence to her, I said, I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to do it. I don't think I'm up to it, and I don't want to find out that I'm not up to it, because I don't think I can face that as a parent. If I'm not willing to do the hard work for my kid, I don't want to face it. And what I said to her was, I found myself wishing that I would get into a car accident that I would go into a coma, not die. I didn't want to die, right? But I just wanted to be put into a coma and have somebody wake me up in 4 years and tell me that it was all over, that all the hard work had been done, and that everything was okay. That's all I wanted. And it's embarrassing and humbling to admit that that's the thought that I had. But I have to be honest with you that that's the thought, that's how overwhelmed I was about the idea of it. So when I say to you, if I could do this, then I know for sure that you can. I know for sure that you can, because I did not think that I could do it. I didn't think that we could do it. I knew that we couldn't financially do it. I 100%, and I don't know how we did. I mean, I can point to some things, but the numbers don't add up. And sometimes that's how a miracle goes. You just have to go, oh, we're doing this. And it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get dirty, and I'm going to get my dress dirty, right? But we're just going to keep on plugging, and we're going to do this. And I'll be honest with you that I heard that the prescription was 4 years. 4 years of that kind of intensity, and I went, okay, mark 4 years. We're going to do 4 years. It ended up being 5. Okay. All right, I'm just going to say, and for some people it's less. Some people get out in 2 and go, woo, we got it. Some people it's 3, we did 5. And what I very honestly said to some people at the retreat was, as many times as I wanted to cancel a session and be like, I just can't do it today. I just can't handle it today. I need a vacation from autism. I just can't, you know what I mean? Like I wanted to be like, oof, we just can't do it. I look back on it now, and I don't have a single regret of a single day that I go, oh, I wish we'd gone to the beach on that day. Not a single one, you guys. And I mean this from the very bottom of my heart. I had a lot of resentment about it while we were going through it, going, why can't we go to the beach like everybody? Why can't we go on vacation? Why, because we're stuck here doing therapy, right? But now that I've seen what happens, I don't have a single regret for a single day that we did therapy. The only regrets I have are days when I couldn't suck it up, days when I couldn't get it together, days when it didn't happen. And here's the other part. Here's the new science that we have that we didn't have back when I was doing therapy. Back when we were doing therapy, we thought the best thing was to have it in the home. Now, we knew that it was important to take it out into the community and go to the grocery store and go to the public pool and go all those places. And that's still super duper important. But we believed that it was important to have it in the home. And the reason why was not because the home was any particular thing. There were certain things that happened in the home that needed to happen there, but because we wanted the parents to learn it. But here's what we have found out. The science is in on this. It's 100% clear. Our kids learn faster when they are in the center. And it's not a little bit faster, you guys. It's a lot faster. 80 to 85% faster when they're in the center. Which means that what took me 5 years to do, we could have done if we had center-based therapy in probably 3 years. In 3 years, and then we would have been back to going to the beach in those last 2 years when we weren't. So I know it's harder because it means that like it used to be, there were days when I was like, oh, I just can't do this, like to the point of, seriously, like, oh no, I can't, and knock, knock, knock at the door, and it was a therapist. And what was I going to do? Send them away? And they were there, and it just kind of happened, right? Now, it means that you got to commit to the center, which is hard, really hard, and then you have to get in the car and drive to it, which is that much harder. And believe me when I say, I get it, I know. But that's the prescription. And I'll hold your hand the whole time. And you can write to me, and you can write nasty things and say, Shannon, I'm so mad at you, and I really hate, send it, shoulders broad, I will take it. But you still got to do it. You got to do it, because I know what happens if you don't. I know the anger in that mom that was like, you did not tell me that this is what I had to do what was best for my child. That it wasn't like the recommended, no, this is what you got to do. This is it, gloves off, it's the truth. And I got to tell you, you're going to sign up for it, and card's going to say, great, but you can't start yet because you got to do this hoop, this hoop, this hoop. And you're going to be like, what? What? You mean you're going to make it harder for me? There are hoops that have to be gone through. And you're going to get there, and the therapist that you are working with, that you love and loves your child, is going to get pregnant and move halfway across the country and be gone. And they're going to have to train somebody, and it's going to take a couple of weeks, and you're going to go, what? Shannon told me it was so important, and now you're telling me I can't have this for a couple of weeks. And you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to pull up the slack, and you're going to have to be calling people, even at CARD, and saying, how soon can I have the next therapist? Stuff's going to happen. It's not going to be easy. Been there, done it. And like I said, if I can do it, you can do it. And let me just tell you, it's worth it. All of it, it's worth it. Okay? So I've gotten on my soapbox now. Because it has to be said. And every single time you have an opportunity for parent training, you have to take it. Yes, I went to clinics sometimes and fell asleep in the middle of it because I was that exhausted and overwhelmed, and like the disc was full and I couldn't take any more, right? And I cried after every single clinic that we had for 5 years. Every single one, I got in the car and cried. Yep, but it's worth it. That's all I can tell you. It's worth it, okay? I hold your hand. Si se puede, right? Always. Do what you got to do. Do it today. Start the process. Call me, yell at me, write me, email me, yell at me. Tell me everything that you're mad about. Fine, let's do that if that's what it takes. Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, always thrilled to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Graham-Pichet is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for a ridiculous number of years. For one who has such good skin, right? It doesn't equate, right? But she's worked with a wide variety of individuals, everything from very young babies to senior citizens. She has a wealth of knowledge. She's truly a visionary in this field, that she recognizes not only that people on the spectrum are whole people, they have whole lives, and that has to be addressed, which thank you for looking at our kids and our adults and everyone in between that way. But she also recognizes that they have a group of people around them that are a support staff, and that those people have individual needs as well, be that the family, siblings,
right.
And also the people who are helping to take care of and to treat, that those are people who have to be also included in an equation of what do we need to do to make the most progress.
Absolutely.
So, and you help to take care of all of us, which
so
I
much.
appreciate.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, honestly. So she is going to answer questions that you guys have sent in. We always like to give you a disclaimer at the start of the show that there is no expert in any field, no matter how many years they work, that could give individual specific advice in this particular format.
Right.
There is telehealth, which is different than this, right? But in this format, she's going to give you information of a general nature,
Right.
which is still incredible.
Well, I hope it'll help.
People write in all the time and say how helpful this is.
That's great. That's great.
And this weekend I got to meet a lot of people in person who were saying that they were
Love
big
your
fans
show.
of the
Oh,
show,
that's great.
and that how helpful this is, and
That's
how much they
awesome.
learn from it. So truly wonderful. But you have to write in. So take advantage of the many different ways to write in. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. And I'm going to start with a question that came in last week that we didn't get to. What does the research say about young children getting only 20 hours a week of ABA therapy? Is it at all effective? I can't quote this, but I once heard about a study that did 20 hours a week for a group of children with autism and compared with children in regular ed who did not receive service, and they made equal progress, and this came into us last week. So, what would you like to say to that?
So, one of the things about autism that's really important for us to pay attention to is that no two children are the same, right? The children are very different from each other. And so I never really like to generalize and say, 20 hours isn't enough. For one child, it might be enough. For another child, it might not be enough. Historically, the concept is that if you are doing a comprehensive ABA program, so if you're trying, and let me define that, the goal of ABA, I'm going to just keep going back in time. The ABA became an important thing, and back when we were able to, in the 80s, show that by doing intensive ABA, children on the spectrum were actually able to recover from autism. So this is when the world started paying attention to this science and said, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's actually shows that these children don't have a lifelong genetic disorder necessarily, and that if you do all the right things, it is possible for at least some children to lead normal lives. And so that was the beginning of a whole new era of looking at the application of behavior analysis or behavioral psychology to autism. And so the original study, which was the LOVA study in '87, which was the seminal study in our field, changed everything, showed that there were 3 groups of children, and there was one group that was our experimental group, and this group was receiving 40 hours a week. They were receiving more than 40 hours a week, and that's kind of something that people don't realize. The reason that we had said 40 hours was because parents work 40 hours a week, so those were the hours where a therapist was working with the child. But really, in that study, we had trained the parents to the point that they were part of the team. And so when the therapists were gone home, the child would continue to receive therapy from the parents. And we did that for many years after the '87 study as well, where parents were actually part of the therapy team, which makes me think maybe we should start actually pushing that a little bit more.
I'm just having a moment here where I'm like, I don't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. And it's funny, if you go back and read that original study where the biggest success was, you can see that it should say every waking hour. And I remember this because we used to talk about that. We used to say, when we were determining recommendations, we'd always look at, if it's a 2-year-old, they're not as awake as long as a 4-year-old is, right? They take naps and so on. So we'd look at covering every waking hour using the entire team and the family, the parents.
And I think a lot of people know that you were a part of that study.
Absolutely.
That study that came out in '87.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, the film of the study I helped make. Yeah. So I worked very hard on that study, and many of the children, I knew most of those children, and was part of their treatment teams or supervising their treatment teams. So I knew those kids. So what was very important was that we did this study. That was our experimental group. The other 2 groups were receiving either 10 hours a week of our type of therapy, and that was only because they were too far from UCLA. And at that time, we had students doing this therapy, and we couldn't send them to 50 miles out. So those kids were receiving 10 hours a week just because we were not in a position to give them 40. And then there was the 3rd group. The 3rd group was receiving about 10 hours a week of intervention at a different section of UCLA, which was called the Neuropsychiatric Institute, NPI, which is now Semel Institute.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was NPI. And so essentially what ended up happening after about 2.5 years, and there were other things, like we tried to match the kids. The kids were all below a certain age, below age 3.5, 4. So what ended up happening after a couple of years was that our group, half of the kids had recovered, and I'm going to talk about the definition of that, the experimental group. The other 2 groups who were receiving 10 hours each, one of them, remember, was receiving 10 hours of our own intervention. It just wasn't enough, and only 2% of those children had actually recovered, which was really one child, and 47% of the experimental group had. So this really showed that there's a huge difference when you do intensive work.
Yeah.
If you don't do enough intensive work, it's just not going to hit all the kids. It's not going to work.
But that's everything in life.
That's everything in life.
If you're trying to learn
That's
to play
in life.
the violin and you only spend an hour on it a week, you're going to get a much different result than if you spend 40 hours a week on it.
That's exactly right. Now, that's a great example because when you look at something like playing the violin, even if you do an hour a week, eventually in 40 years you might learn just as much as someone who did 10 hours a week learned when they were 5. You know what I mean? So what you're doing by doing less hours is you're extending the time frame. Now, with children who are learning, you don't have the luxury of extending the time frame because when you do that, the child is aging, right? The chronological age is increasing. And as they get older and older and older, two things happen. One is there are thousands more things they have to learn. Just think about what a 2-year-old is capable of doing as opposed to a 6-year-old or 5-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, a 5-year-old being able to teach all the things that a typically developing 5-year-old knows how to do is a massive amount of work. And then on top of that, the child now has to go to school as well.
Yeah.
So your hours are going down. Your hours of availability for this child are going down, and the amount of stuff that the child has to learn is increasing. So that's one thing. Yeah. The other thing that happens is brain plasticity goes down. So the highest, we just can't learn enough when we're past age 7. But this is why people who are fluent in multiple languages have always been exposed to those languages prior to age 7. Because the highest flexibility of the brain and the ability to learn new material is much, much younger.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the concept of teaching a child intensively is very, very important. Now, if you have a child, so that's to the study, right? That's the key study. I think the study that you are referring to here is the Sallows study, the Glenn Sallows study. And you should actually go back and look at that study. It's not a matter of there was equal progress. There were a lot of different findings in that study. And here's what I want you to think about. Don't worry about a study. You have a child. And what's important is to think about your child. Because studies in general, the findings of a study are relevant only in that they apply to masses. When you're looking at one single child and you're looking at a spectrum disorder like autism, it's really valuable, more valid, much more valid if you have the ability to just look at your child and see what would be appropriate for your child. If there's a very, very high functioning young child, then obviously what they have to learn is less and you have more time because they're very young, like 2 years old. If it's a very severely autistic older child, then obviously what they need to learn is more and you're out of time, right? So this is what's important. How much time do you have and how severely in need is your child? So that's why I always say do an assessment to find out exactly what your child needs. That's why many years ago, as you know, Shannon, we developed the skills index, the assessment on skills. And I really recommend for this viewer to get on Skills. And that is just, you go online and you look for skillsforautism.com.
I have a little tent somewhere and I'm looking
I know,
for
I
it
don't
to
see
see.
it anywhere.
I moved it off the desk. I'll find it.
But essentially just Google skillsforautism.com and you'll go in there. And there's an assessment portion, and it starts with asking you questions about your child. You put in your child's age, your chronological age, and so the assessment will give you every possible skill that a typically functioning child of that age should be able to master, should be able to do right now. So it'll ask you questions. It'll ask you hundreds of questions. For example, it'll start with, does your child make sounds? If you say yes to that, you go to more advanced questions like what kind of sound. It's all yes and no. Does your child make this type of sound? Does your child say single words? Does your child communicate in 3-word phrases? Does your child use these types of adjectives or whatever it is? It keeps going on, and that's just language, but the questions are through all areas of functioning. So you'll get a series of questions in language, motor, adaptive skills, social skills, play skills. Let's see, motor is both fine motor and gross motor. executive functions, cognitive skills. I mean, it's pretty much across all areas of functioning, including academic. So you answer all these questions, yes or no, my child can or cannot, and you'll get a nice little visual that shows the deficits, like the areas your child is not doing, and they should, because it's their age level. Like, you should be actually able to say 3-word phrases if you are age 2, that sort of thing. And it'll give you an exact listing of all the different sub-skills that need to be taught to catch your child up to a certain age. If you know, you look at that, and now someone who is experienced with ABA will come in and they'll start doing work with your child for a few months. This is the most accurate you can get. And if it's a good BCBA who's done this for many years, that's very important, because this is really based on experience, right? You look at the rate of acquisition of the child. Now, we've actually developed an algorithm which we're trying to get on external skills so people can play with this. And once your child is learning for 6 months or so, we develop what's called a rate of learning line. Like, it'll show how fast your child masters things. Does your child master them, like a new thing every hour? Does your child master a new concept every week? Whatever it is, of a certain difficulty level, right? So it shows kind of like if your child is mastering things at this angle versus at this angle, that means they're mastering things pretty rapidly. You put in your child's age, you put in you have a history of your child's learning rate. That's learning rate. That's the number of items they learn over time. And then you know how long and how many hours. And you say, okay, my child's only 2, and I have like 3 more years where my child will be 5. And how much intensity do I need for 3 years in order for my child to actually get to typical levels? So he's missing, let's say, 200 skills. I need to teach these 200 skills, and he's learning at this rate. How many hours a week should I actually do in order for my child to hit the line of trajectory that gets to the point where he's going to master all these 200 things, right? It'll tell you the intensity. Now, the intensity is going to be either very intense, like 40 hours, or more, or it's going to be 20 hours, or it's going to be 10 hours. It depends on your child and your child's rate of learning. That's like way more accurate than looking at what past research has said. Now, all of that aside, I do want to say kind of a disclaimer about this, because I'm one of those people that would like to, you know, when your child has aged, they've aged. The time has passed, right? So it's always better to err on the side of being cautious and doing more rather than doing less. Because by doing more, all you're doing is speeding up time, right? Your child might master things faster than age 5. They might get to the level of normal by 4. Great. Everybody's happy. By doing less, you might miss the mark. Right? Your child might get to age 5 and 6 and your funding all cut out and you have to go to school, and your child still has 100 things left to learn. That's why I always push people to go for more intensity at the beginning when the child is young, because later on a lot of issues happen. It's much harder to get funding for older kids, and there's a million other things that you're dealing with, academics and safety and lots of other things.
But now, having said that,
a huge long answer,
right?
Sorry.
But having said that, for the mom of the 15-year-old who's watching, who's never had ABA,
right?
We don't want you to think that there's no reason to get ABA now, even though your child has aged out, and
aged out of
that
recovery,
intensive early,
aged out of recovery. That doesn't mean anything, right? Because for the 15-year-old, you have, let's say, you're at a point where there are like 100 skills missing, and the key skills that you want to teach your child, which would keep him safe, help him communicate, get him to a point where he can have a vocation, get him to a point where he might be able to live independently, all of those things do not necessitate teaching all 100 skills. You just maybe have to teach 20, 30 skills, and that's extremely doable. ABA is a way of teaching. It's not something that you age out of. It's effective even if you're 70 years old. It doesn't matter what age you are. It is a technique for teaching, and it works more than anything else. And it works not just with the population of individuals with autism, it works on us.
Yes.
It works with everyone. It's the most effective way of changing behavior. So absolutely, for the 15-year-old, for the 30-year-old, yesterday we had a call from someone who's, they were calling for a 45-year-old.
Yeah.
And I was excited about it, because bringing someone in at that age to our adult center and helping them is very exciting.
It's life-changing.
Absolutely.
I mean, the families who, it's just so incredible to think that sometimes there's one little thing that if you could fix it, the quality of life goes up for everyone, for that individual and for everybody
Definitely.
who loves them. So don't feel like there's no reason after a certain time. But if you are in that window of time when your child is young, take everything that you can and use it to the max. You will, I say this to parents every day of the week, you will never be sorry if you do everything and more.
That's right.
You will get someplace that you didn't know that you could get. It will be different for every single person. But the thing that's great is you will have nothing left in you that's like, oh, I wonder if we had... Right?
Right.
I see
Absolutely
the parents
right.
of the teenagers who go, oh man, I missed the boat. And they, I hate it when parents are stuck there because they're missing something right now. If you've got a young kid, don't give that to yourself later on. Give yourself the gift of knowing we did everything that we could and do as many hours as you can.
Right.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to be back to answer more of your questions. So stick with us. So moving on to the third question, our son was just diagnosed with ASD. He is almost 3, and we are being told to have him do 20 hours of therapy a week. That sounds like a lot for a 3-year-old. Wouldn't 10 hours be enough? He's a kid. We don't want him to feel like he has a job.
Absolutely. I mean, I completely hear where this parent is coming from and can understand how 20 hours does sound like a lot of therapy. It's scary and it's stressful, and I know that you would be worried about this being too much for him, but to be totally and completely honest, when I hear 3 years old, I hear opportunity, and I hear that I see that we have the opportunity to maximize this time in his life to teach him so much. And with that said, I would definitely encourage this parent to reach out to their BCBA to even possibly discuss ramping up hours and starting off with something a little slower and then getting to those 20 hours just to ensure that there's a very smooth transition, because he is 3 years old. And I would also really suggest getting involved in your son's ABA by sitting in sessions. I really think it'd make this parent feel more comfortable, because I think parents will be pleasantly surprised to see that sessions with a 3-year-old are actually a lot of fun. There's so much play involved that our clients sometimes don't realize that they're actually learning so much. And of course, I mean, we default to research, right? So there's a ton of research out there that talks about that early intensive treatment. And so partnering with your supervisor to look at that and just take baby steps and take it slow and just really understand is really going to be a key component of the success of your son's treatment.
And you are so sweet and so politically correct, not to throw somebody else under the bus, but people who watch the show know that I will. I have grave concerns about this, because if you have a 3-year-old who's on the autism spectrum and your supervisor is telling you that you need 20 hours a week, the first thing that I would do is go back and ask, why did you only prescribe 20? Show me the study and show me the reason why clinically you think that 20 hours is actually enough. I know the first time that somebody talked to me when my son was not yet 3 and they were saying 40 hours a week. 40 hours a week. And I was like, you're out of your mind. That's a full-time job. He isn't even 3. Seriously, what's your problem? And then they showed me the studies and said to me, you find in there where it says 20 is enough. And I got to tell you, I haven't seen that study, that 3 hours is that 20 hours is enough for a 3-year-old. Um, so, and it may be that your clinician is super fabulous and I don't know what I'm talking about. And they say, oh, no, 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 here are the things that your child has. And that's why I'm advocating for something outside of what the research says. But if I were that parent, I'd be fighting for 40.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
And I know that, Crystal, you're a professional and you hate to throw another professional under the bus. But I want parents to know that there are professionals that are out there who have gotten used to what insurance will fund. Because
Right.
insurance doesn't want to pay for 40 hours. They really don't. There are exceptions. There are insurance companies who are like, yes, we do want to pay for 40 hours because we know it saves us a lot of money in the long run because your child will do better, they'll graduate earlier, and they won't need support services later on. But there's a lot of insurance that doesn't understand that yet. And so they have said to the providers, we're only going to give you 20, so don't prescribe more than 20. Well, guess what? Insurance companies don't get to tell professionals what to prescribe. But
Absolutely.
not everybody gets that. But if you have a professional who has gotten used to getting turned down for 40 and is now prescribing 20, I would seriously look at and see if you are with the right people. Because you need somebody who's going to show you what's effective and let you fight with the insurance company, not just give up before you. And there's going to be a fight. Don't kid yourself. Fighting for 40 hours is very, like Crystal, you have a lot of parents that end up having to fight for the 40 hours, don't you?
Absolutely. I have so many parents that fight for the 40. And to be honest, I've even recommended 50 or 60 hours. Because
You go, girl. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Those are the kinds of professionals we need to be with as parents, the ones who look at our kids as individuals and say, what does this kiddo need and what does research show works with what this kid needs? But I'm just going to tell you, the study that shows the 20 hours for a 3-year-old, I haven't seen it. If somebody can find it, let me know. But I have not seen that.
Me neither.
But and I know that there's an emotional component to this, and I hear you saying you want them to have a good time. As a parent who's been there and done that 40 hours a week, my kid had a ball. The therapist played with him. Half the time he didn't know he was learning, but he learned, and it was worth it. I feel like I just got out of soapbox, Crystal. See, I got all hepped up. But thank you for reminding us that it should be fun, and thank you for helping this parent to realize that 10 is completely inappropriate. I would say start at the 20 and ramp up to 30 and then fight like your life depends it to get to 40. But ask me how I really feel. We had a comment that came in based on the last question, and I can't leave it alone. Rana has written in and said, go for 15 hours of ABA. We never got more than 40 hours. It's just not realistic for a 4-year-old. It's too much to handle. And I just want to lovingly say to Rana, and Rana, you know that I love you, but that is not what works. And it isn't realistic at all to be able to do more than 15 hours with a 4-year-old, but it is what you need to do. And Nanette, you're an expert. Can we talk to our parents for a second about why we don't do 15 hours with a 4-year-old and why you need to make it reasonable to do 40?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think that's a great comment to come in right now. I think the big thing that I always try to, communicate to the families is that there's an age gap, with the diagnosis. So let's say that they get diagnosed at the age, if we're going back to talking about our friend in the first question, he's 4, but he's already he's functioning at about a 2-year-old level. So we've already got an age gap of about 2 years right now. And if we continue to not do early intensive, treatment, then that age gap continues to grow every single year. Of course, we can't necessarily predict at what rate that's going to grow, but we know that they're just going to continue to be further and further behind. And we hate to see that because our ultimate goal for that patient is to be as successful and as independent as they possibly can in the future. So really, we'd like to see the 40-hour very intensive treatment protocol right off the bat, because then we can work very, very hard on closing that age gap, and then getting them to a place that's more typical with their peers, so that the treatment services don't have to be as lengthy. I think if we look at having, 15 hours a week because it might be easier on that patient right now, they might need 15 hours a week for the next 15 years. And that's really not what we necessarily want to see.
Absolutely. I just want to say, think of it like if you said to somebody, I'm in this kind of shape that I'm in right now, and I said to you, I want to become a bodybuilder and I want to have ripped abs. And I went to an expert and I said, that's what I want to do. That expert would say to me, you're going to have to change everything that you do, and you're going to have to spend multiple hours in the gym every day for years. If that's what you want to do, if you really want to make a change and you want to change the way this all looks, you're not going to be able to do it in 8 hours a month at the gym, right? None of us
No.
would think that. And it's the same thing. But we see people who suddenly make a decision and go, I'm going to change and do this very healthy lifestyle, and I'm going to go to the gym, and they change the shape of their bodies. And I really, when my son was getting therapy at first, I just thought the whole idea of 40 hours, I was like, this is crazy. And there's no way, he's 3, he can't do 40 hours. And I just want to say to everybody who's listening, don't listen to the people who tell you, well, 15 is enough. They're just 3 or they're just 4. It's crazy to do more than that. It is. I absolutely get where you're coming from, but it's crazy good. And what happened to my son in a year, it was life changing. Don't let somebody cheat you out of it. The science is there that shows that it works. It will upend your household and your lives, but I'm promising you that it's worth it. But I know it seems unreasonable, but you can't settle for 15. They're selling you a bill of goods if they're telling you 15. There is no study that shows that will be effective at helping your child get to meaningful progress. Son is 4 years old and just started ABA, but the BCBA only submitted for 15 hours. She noted that since he is not having meltdowns with them or self-injurious behaviors, that 15 hours is the max that he can get. He does have stimming, but for the last month, he is only getting 4 hours because we can't find another ABA to help with the other 11 hours. She also said he has that he has language and is compliant, so the hours go to the kids that are more severe. They are saying Medicaid in Florida does not pay for just skill acquisition. My son's speech is on a 2-year-old level, and he is not consistently social with his peers. He does not use his speech a lot at school, and in fact, that is one of the goals for him, to initiate his needs and wants. He doesn't ask questions and is not anywhere near conversational. They are even telling me that they can't shadow him in a typical preschool. What should I do? I know he is very behind. Is this true that he doesn't meet medical necessity? And Nanette, thank you for being here, because this hurts my head so hard for this mom. What do you have for us, Nanette?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that there's a lot of components to this question specifically. So I'm kind of going to tackle it from a few different angles. But, CARDS practice and CARDS model, we really base a lot of our recommendations, or all of our recommendations, off of the research. And research does show that, with our younger patients within that age range, he's 4 years old, but mom is noting that he has language of that of a 2-year-old. That's where we would really see that early intervention really be the most effective and really necessary treatment to have that best possible outcome for that patient. So with that, obviously without meeting the patient, typically with a younger client like that, we do look at having treatment programs that are more towards the 40-hour-a-week mark, so that we could get that early intensive treatment done at the younger age. A big portion of what we do is really, it's 2 components. We do a lot of skill acquisition, which is typically what I explain about half of our treatment model, and then the other half is the behavior reduction. It sounds like there might not be as many maladaptive behaviors that we would need to work on reducing here. So maybe that's where we would focus on more of the skill acquisition, but we always do want to have those two components to the treatment plan. Um, Also, I think that they the mother had referenced what the funding source will allow. And so I wanted to touch on that a little bit too. I think, funding sources, as we know, they can be pretty particular about what they want to see in a treatment plan or what they will fund. And if they don't think there's a specific need because there's not a lot of maladaptive behaviors or they don't want to work on particular skills, we do unfortunately see that we never make our recommendations really based on only what they want to see, though. I still, I'm a big proponent for always putting what we still think is clinically necessary for that patient and really like what we as the BCBA think needs to happen for that patient. Um, and then I know another portion of that question was the school shadow piece. Um, and I know that that's kind of something that they're running into. We can't have the school shadow right now. I will say just, my experiences here in the state of Colorado, and unfortunately, we are not allowed to go into a lot of the public school districts here. And that's just because they have, their own team on staff. They have BCBAs kind of running their own in-house ABA program. So that's kind of what we've been running into here. So I don't know, maybe that's maybe why the BCBA is saying that we can't get in the school to shadow him right now. It might be a logistic thing like that. Um,
The thing that jumps out, you're being so professional, Nanette, and being so kind, because this makes me want to just say to this mom, this is not quality ABA that you're getting. For somebody
Right.
to sit there and say that we're giving 15 hours, and we have somebody that is at least 2 years behind language, and they're saying that they're not seeing challenging behaviors, and maybe they're not the big ones, maybe he's not biting anybody, but I can't believe that somebody's 2 years behind, that there aren't maladaptive behaviors. And this whole idea of, oh, we're only going to give you 15 hours, but we can only staff 4 of it because we're giving it
Yeah.
to the more severe kids.
Yeah.
I think this mom already knows she's got to find another ABA provider, but there isn't one. And that's the tough thing, that until there can be one, do you make do with what you have and try to supplement it at home? This is the really hard part, I think, for parents,
Yeah.
is when they realize, okay, I don't have what it is that apparently I need to have, so what do I do?
Right. Absolutely. And I
But
think that's tough. Oh, go ahead.
no. I just was going to say, you have to make do with what you can while you're looking for the best chance.
Yeah. And I definitely think it sounds like there's not a lot of options there, but working on getting a second opinion, I think, would be definitely crucial in this situation, because you want to make sure that we're tackling this while he's still so young. And I think, maybe continue with what you have right now. I know staffing can be a challenge. It sounds like we're only getting 4 hours, which is definitely not enough for this patient. So I don't know if there's nothing else in the area, if the family maybe has access to respite or a babysitter or, family members, including the parents, getting a parent training model set up where we're just learning the skills, and maybe teaching some of the staff that could maybe help in the home, like a respite worker, to do some hours just to supplement, so we're not losing that time while we're looking for somebody else. And I know, at CARD we have telehealth services for reasons just like that. Like if we don't
Exactly.
have an office close by where we can help, then let's get at least a BCBA remote for you, so we can get something going where, like I said, we're training a respite worker to do more hours in the house per week.
Absolutely. I love that, Nanette. For this mom, get what your child needs. Get a 40-hour program, even if you've got to do it yourself.